Welcome back, Twisters, and hey there, hockey fans. Nick here, and today I'm going to be grading the Seattle Kraken's offseason. So the way I'll be doing that is evaluating the offseason in 4 categories. We'll look at the expansion draft, we'll look at free agency, we'll look at the entry draft, so the prospects that they acquired, and we'll also look at coaching because that is new to this franchise as well. So whether or not you're a Kraken fan, I encourage you to hit the red subscribe button down below. Join the Twist Brigade, nearly at 2,000 subs. And if you really enjoy this video, give it a thumbs up and share it with your community out there. So let's take a look at this. My first category is the expansion draft. And overall, I think the Kraken did a fairly solid job. Now, you have to take into consideration that although they had the same expansion draft rules as the Vegas Golden Knights, teams were generally better prepared. So you saw a couple of superstars out there, big contracts, but a lot of those players were UFAs, so Seattle would have had to come to terms already. So they did a good job, I think, just building out a deep team. Maybe not so stacked when you look at the top pairing and the top line, but when you look a little bit further down the depth chart, it's very solidified. So I look at players like Brandon Tanev, Jared McCann, good job, Maple Leafs. Mason Appleton was a good acquisition. Kalle Yarncroke. Looking at that defensive depth and the beef on that blue line. Players like Oleksiak, Adam Larson, Mark Giordano for some leadership there. Overall, I like that quite a bit. Yanni Gourde, too, despite his contract, the guy can put up a lot of points and do a lot of different things that you don't necessarily get out of other players. There were a few kind of question marks, but even so, I could still find justifications behind selecting some of these players. As I mentioned earlier, Giordano, I know that his cap hit is over $6 million for just 1 year, though, so some of that veteran leadership is certainly a good quality to have. Nonetheless, I think that they could have maybe used that to select somebody younger, even if they weren't a captain before. I would have liked to see them select JT Compher from the Avalanche instead of Jonas Donskoy. I do like Donskoy, but Compher, I think, adds a lot of sandpaper to his game as well. And he also takes some face-offs, so that helps too. But again, it's almost like I'm splitting hairs at this point. So Dennis Cholowski versus somebody like Troy Stetcher. Yanni Gourde, as I mentioned earlier, while I really like him, he does have kind of a long term to his deal versus somebody like Killorn or Palat. But again, he has a lot of intangibles out there as well. And of course, they didn't decide to bite on guys like Tarasenko or Domi. But the thing is that they ended up with over $30 million remaining in cap space, and they went to spend that in free agency. So everything there, I think, is pretty good. They even got draft picks from a couple of their selections. So Vitek Vanacek from the Capitals, they just got a 2023 second rounder in order for him to go back to Washington. I really like that quite a bit. Tyler Pitlick fetched a 2022 fourth round selection, and Curtis McDermott, a fourth round selection in 2023. So overall, I think that Seattle did a very good job with this. I gave them the grade of a B+. Now let's look at my next topic, and that is the entry draft. So looking at the Seattle Kraken prospects. Number 2 overall, Matty Beniers from the University of Michigan. Pretty much a layup here. Seattle was expected to pick him if Owen Power was going to go number 1, which most analysts had out there. There really weren't that many other players you could put in that conversation of second overall. So they got their guy at franchise center, has been compared to the likes of Taves and Bergeron. So that is a great franchise cornerstone for an expansion franchise. And yeah, even though it was an easy selection for them to make, I have to definitely credit them there. Number 35 overall, they selected defenseman Riker Evans from the WHL and with the Regina Pats. He was 19 years old, and so that means he's kind of an overage defenseman, and some teams out there might have him lower on the draft board by default. Riker Evans, though, look at his rankings. The Hockey Writers, he was 114th overall. Among North American skaters, NHL.com had him ranked 192nd. He was not in the top 100 for Dauber prospects or for draft prospects. So this guy was a reach, to say the least. He's been very productive in the WHL nonetheless. He's known for a good puck-moving game, just distributing it out of the zone, racked up tons of assists with the Pats. And apparently he has a very solid defensive game as well. I do find it a little bit odd, especially with a deep defense draft class, that the Kraken would opt for him at this position. So I think the pick could eventually pan out, but it is a little odd. So we're looking at the third round. They drafted center Ryan Winterton from the Hamilton Bulldogs. He could also, I think, be moved to wing. A couple other outlets out there had him projected as a wing. Here are his rankings. 82nd overall from the Hockey News, 84th overall from the Hockey Writers, 33rd among North American skaters with NHL.com. He's only played one OHL season completely, and of course they didn't have this last season because of the pandemic. He's only 17 years old as I make this video. So overall, this looks to be a pretty solid fit, whether this guy stays at center or moves over to the wing. And then at number 99 overall, they selected defenseman Ville Ottawainen. He's from the Finnish Liga, and he's also played in the OHL with the Kitchener Rangers. He's known as a stay-at-home defenseman. He's a big guy. I think he's 6'4", 200 pounds. Ranked 90th among European skaters on NHL.com. I didn't see him in the top 120 or in the top 160 among other outlets. So again, this guy might be a little bit of a reach, but he's a nice complement to Riker Evans, who's a little bit more of an all-around defenseman with offensive upside. And then I'll just highlight the other picks. I don't really know too much about these guys, and we can't expect that they're going to pan out to NHL talent. So right wing Jacob Malanson from the Bathurst Titan of the QMJHL, he was selected 131st overall in the 5th round. 163rd overall was goaltender Semyon Vyatsovoy from the MHL in Russia. He was ranked 8th among European goaltenders. And then at 195th in the 7th round, the Kraken selected left wing Justin Janicki from the USHL. He's also played for the US development program too. So my overall grade for the Kraken here, of course, Matty Beniers, the slam dunk. They didn't get cute. They selected a good franchise cornerstone there. Certainly a bit of a reach with Riker Evans on paper, but that's only as much as I know. The good thing with the Kraken is that they built out a roster of prospects. So you had a goaltender, you had 2 defensemen, a couple wings, a couple centers. So overall, I'm going to be a little bit more critical here and give the Kraken a B-, mostly for the 2nd round. And again, Ottavainen wasn't really, he was also drafted ahead of where he was projected. The next topic that I want to address here is free agency. I think the Kraken hit it out of the park, really. They did a fantastic job. Again, as I mentioned earlier, they had over $30 million in remaining cap. And at the time that I'm making this video, they still have $16.4 million remaining. Of course, they need to sign Vince Dunn because they drafted him as an RFA. But the acquisitions they got, I think, fit really well into the makeup of this team. Very affordable options and guys who are still in their prime. So Philip Grubauer as their starting goaltender, 6 years, $5.9 million. A guy who was in the Vezina conversation. He was a finalist this past season. Just a really consistent goaltender. I think that he's probably one of the best when it comes to that. And so when you have him at $6 million a year, or 5.9, and then you have Driedger as your backup, who had a great season at a 3.5 annual average annual value, you have under $10 million for 2 very good goaltenders. Then they went out and signed Jaden Schwartz from the St. Louis Blues, 5 years at $5.5 million. Now, Schwartz had a down year last season, and I think he's 29, so yeah, he's still in his prime, but 5 years, yeah, maybe the term on that is a little bit lengthy. But when you look at the Kraken's overall makeup here, I'm going to flash a graphic with the projected lineup. This comes from Emerald City Hockey, by the way. I recommend following them on Twitter, checking out their website, and subscribing to them because they have a YouTube channel. So you have players like Brandon Tanev, Yanni Gord, Jonas Donskoy, Jared McCann. These are guys who do add quite a good amount of defensive skills to the forward group. So you did need more pure offense. They got that in Schwartz, and then they got that also in Alexander Wenberg. As for Schwartz, in the last 5 seasons, if you look at his 82-game scoring rate, 58 points. So a guy who could put up 58 points next season. I like that quite a bit. Reliable with the puck out there. So good signing, not a great signing, but of course, Ron Francis had some cap to play with for sure. The other deal that they made there was for Alexander Wenberg to potentially play first-line center. He was signed at 3 years at $4.5 million. I really like this because Wenberg had a good rebound season this last year with the Panthers. His lone season there, scored 17 goals. He had 2 down seasons before that in Columbus, but of course he has shown at times that he can be a very good top 6 player. His faceoffs improved this last season as well. And he played a more important role with Florida. His ice time bounced back up as well. So this guy is going to fit in the top 6. Again, first or second line center most likely. $4.5 million for a guy who can score you, upwards of about 50 points. I think that's a solid deal. He's only 27 years old as well. So these are just looking like very good acquisitions for this team. They're not going to be world beaters on that top line. But again, you kind of look at the Vegas Golden Knights when they were first starting out with guys like William Karlsson, Riley Smith, and Jonathan Marchessault. So with that in mind, and with the fact that the Kraken have $16 million remaining, I'm giving them an A for free agency. And the thing is that they could even take that cap and absorb a bad contract or two from another team, stockpile draft picks, and that way they remain a little bit above the cap floor as well. So really good going by Ron Francis there. And then lastly, let's look at coaching. So the Kraken, of course, named their first head coach, Dave Hakstol. He comes over from the Toronto Maple Leafs where he was an assistant. And before then, he spent 4-ish seasons with the Philadelphia Flyers. Now, I know that there was a lot of criticism of the hiring. One reason was because there were a lot more proven head coaches available. Guys like, well, of course, Gallant was one of them. Bruce Boudreau was probably available to an extent. Rick Tocchet was rumored to be interviewing with them. John Tortorella even. So they went with Hakstol. Some Flyers fans out there will have their criticisms of him. I have to say that this guy definitely earns another chance as an NHL head coach out there. He's a little bit younger than some of those names, a couple of those names that I listed earlier too. So why not give him a shot? That's kind of my thought behind that as well. Where the Kraken earn high marks from me when it comes to coaching are the two assistants that they've brought on so far. So first of all, Paul Mcfarland coached alongside Hakstol with the Maple Leafs, and before that he coached with the Florida Panthers. So let's look at Mcfarland's track record with the Panthers. So he was there for 2 seasons with Bob Boughner behind the bench. They finished 10th in the league in goals for average at 3.10, 6th in power play at 23.0%. Very good numbers there. You look at some of the career highs that were set by players like Barkov, Huberdeau, Dodonov, Mike Hoffman as well. Then he goes over to Toronto, and in his season there, the Leafs finished 3rd in goals for average, 3.39, 5th in power play percentage, 23.1%. So overall, this is a great offensive-minded coach to assist Mr. Hakstol. And then on the flip side, you have Jay Leach, former NHL player. He built a defensive force in the AHL with the Providence Bruins. He worked with players like Connor Clifton, Charlie McAvoy, and Seattle Kraken defenseman Jeremy Lauzon. So that's a bit of a plus there. And in his time with the Providence Bruins, he coached for 4 seasons, I believe. 2 times they finished 2nd in the AHL in goals against. So that defensive structure and hopefully some PK specializations there, that's what Jay Leach is going to bring to the table. So I really like those quite a bit. The only other downside here is that they haven't named a goaltending coach, so I'm curious to know who that's going to be. So overall, Hakstol may be a bit of a question mark. I personally think that he's a fine fit. Love the assistants, no goaltending coach. I'm going to give them a B. So my final report card looks like this. So of course, I mentioned earlier when it comes to the expansion draft, I gave them a B+, very strong job there, leaving lots of cap space available for free agency. Prospects, I've got a B-, that's my most critical I've been of them. But again, we'll have to see how somebody like Riker Evans pays out. Free agency, they aced it. I'm giving them an A there. And of course, what I just talked about, coaching, I gave them a B. So my overall grade for the Kraken this offseason is a very solid B+. I think Francis, Hakstol, and everybody else around them has done a very nice job assembling this team. I do see them competitive in the Pacific Division. I can't wait to do my division preview and predictions because I think Seattle could challenge for as high as, I don't know, maybe 2nd. But hey, that's just me. I'll be following the Seattle Kraken and producing content not only on this channel, but also with the hockeywriters.com. I am a contributor there for the league's 32nd team. So make sure, if you haven't already, hit the red subscribe button down below and check the video description for links to my Twitter and Instagram. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Once again, I'm Nick, and I'll catch you twisters later for more coverage of the Seattle Kraken and the rest of the NHL. Thanks so much for tuning in. You guys have a good one out there. Ciao.